My name is Simon Jenkins. I edit a website called Ship of Fools, which has got a kind of comedy take on the Christian faith, as well as being the home of the mystery worshipper. I don't know, maybe some of you know the mystery worshipper, which is like the church shopper, but for churches. The mystery shopper, but for churches, where we send volunteers into churches around the world to sit in a back pew and then post a first-timer's impression of what church was like in that Sunday on that particular day. I'm also the author of a few books, one of which I'll show you is about the icons of Orthodoxy, or Russian Orthodoxy. I actually spent 10 years in going to Russian Orthodox Church, and the book really is a kind of introduction to icons, and icons are part of my spiritual practice, so I wanted to share that Elijah one with you. But while I have icons that I pray with and work with, I also have a growing collection of, and this is going to sound weird now, but it's a growing collection of plastic statues of Jesus. I mean, someone has got to collect these. I've not seen many people doing it. So I started on eBay a few years ago, started collecting statues, found a wonderful little 1940s statue. You can see he's actually got rhinestone halo there. You would actually put this on the dashboard of your car in America. It's a wonderful thing. I've got Rio de Janeiro Jesus. I've got Sacred Heart Jesus, lovely Catholic with rays of light coming out, and lots of other comedy ones as well. I mean, such as this one. This is South Park Jesus, fantastic statue, as you can see. Jesus looking very South Park character-like. And I'm really interested, of course, it's fun to do, but I'm also interested in how people experience faith or how they think about Jesus in low culture as well as in high culture, like icons in art objects, and especially in plastic, which is such a problematic material for us now. You know, these kitschy representations of Jesus, they seem a million miles away from our faith. But in fact, well, we'll see in a minute how that works out. And that plays to my other book, which is Jumble Sales of the Apocalypse, published by SPCK about 4 or 5 years ago now. And that arose out of a column I wrote for Reform magazine for the URC. Steve Tompkins, the editor, and I are old friends from Ship of Fools days, and he persuaded me to write some columns for him. And this book is about the funny side of church life. So let me just get this up on screen. It's about the funny side of church life, like 60-foot high statues of Jesus, or hymns that have got rude words, or the venerable history of church beards and why the Pope doesn't have one, typing in tongues, and big theological questions such as, should I eat chocolate in Lent, how church ministers should retaliate when they're processing into church and the organist plays Send in the Clowns, all those important kind of things. And the book really is about religion and comedy, or how religion can become unintentionally hilarious when it goes wrong, like it's doing here for dear old Nicky Gumbel, who seems to be claiming to be Jesus, in fact. And, things do go wrong in church life quite a lot of the time. Sometimes, though, it does go right, like it did for a crab caught in a fishing pot in Snohomish County, Washington, a couple of years ago. The crab was trying to make a break for it when an American park ranger flipped it over onto its back to reveal the face of Jesus on its belly. And personally, I think the markings look more like Guy Fawkes wearing sunglasses, but Regis Swanson, the park ranger, immediately posted a picture on her Twitter feed with the caption, "Went crabbing, found Jesus." And this was good news for at least two reasons. First, Regis Swanson let the holy crab go back into the sea rather than into a crab and avocado salad served with a crisp Chardonnay. And secondly, at least this picture of Jesus hadn't appeared on the back end of a dog, as happened a few years ago to much hilarity on Facebook. Actually, the internet was divided on this theological question. Some thought the dog's bottom looked like Darwin, a little pet monkey that was snapped wandering through IKEA a few years ago and which became an internet meme. Anyway, the crab that witnessed to Jesus reminded me that this past year has been a bumper time for people finding God in unpromising places. And guest appearances by Jesus have been reported in the news with ever-increasing frequency. So last August, you may be puzzling over this image, but you can see here, these are the eyes of Jesus here, these two eyes. The nose is here, and then here's kind of a big bit of hair, and his beard is down here. And, you know, Nicky Helkerson of Dundee spotted this face in a £1.15 bag of Aldi spuds. And then in December, he appeared in Waltham Abbey, Essex on a Brussels sprout. And that was just before Christmas, so that was really liturgically appropriate. And Shauna Roberts, who found him, reverently popped him into a cupboard for a while, saying she couldn't possibly have cooked him. But then she commented, after he stopped looking like Jesus, he got put in the green recycling bin. That's the spirit, Shauna. And now, just a few weeks ago, The Sun reported that highway workers in Holbeach, Lincolnshire, had a road to Damascus moment when they saw the figure of Jesus on the back of a dusty safety sign. And I've got to say, this is really impressive. It looks a bit like something out of the catacombs, a kind of catacombs Jesus, but actually on the back of a road sign. But, you know, Jesus has been showing up all over the place for a long time, often as a tortilla in Honduras, or on a mudslide in Colombia, or in a boulder spotted on Mars, no less, with the kind of Turin Shroud Christ there in that boulder, if you can see it, and in a piece of toast in Oregon, and finally in a crumpled sock, hung out to dry in Orpington. And Sarah Crane, who found it, said, unfortunately, it's not quite good enough to donate to our local church, but our friends have all been around to see it, which is a really nice thought, you've got to say. Now, sadly, not all of these miracles have been greeted with a burst of the Hallelujah chorus, but they have been appreciated. So when a big, gloomy, bearded Christ was discerned in the wood grain of a toilet door in IKEA's Glasgow, The Sun headlined the story, "He's not the Messiah." And going back a bit, I can't let the mention of a tortilla go by without noting that the love affair between Jesus and the Latin flatbread has been passionate and enduring, as witness all these incredible pictures posted on the internet, being posted so many times. There's a wealth of tortilla Jesuses on the internet. And it seems the tortilla has overtaken the thunderbolt as God's favored method of grabbing the attention of the human race. In fact, the newsworthiness of these images of Jesus prompted Nestle, the manufacturers of Kit Kat, to get a picture planted in the press a few years ago showing the Turin Shroud face of Christ on a bitten off Kit Kat bar. You can see it here. A year later, they revealed that the picture had been photoshopped and it was a fake. But by then, the story had gone viral and was on 150,000 websites, giving Nestle a huge amount of free publicity. So, you know, these pictures of Jesus are constantly in the media, and they're a way in which people can make money. So where did I get into all this finding religion funny? When did I first start finding religion funny? And I think it goes back to the 1960s, when I was on my way to school one morning and I saw my very first wayside pulpit. As I sauntered past in short trousers, there on the wall of the local Methodist church, on the roundabout in Whitchurch, Cardiff, was a poster in day-glow orange and black lettering which asked, CH, what's missing? Below this question were the letters, you are. And as we can see here, Newquay URC has followed this splendid, wonderful poster, kind of time-honored poster. And in fact, you know, it's been all over the place, this poster. This is an example from America with a wonderful upside down apostrophe, which just shows how classy this whole idea is, basically. And seeing this was like a banana skin on the road to Damascus. I fell in love on the spot with the farcical side of Christianity. And since then, I've seen many cheesy church signs. I'm sure we all have. But one of my favorites ever, which I just have to share with you, is this one. God is the potter, not Harry, by a church objecting to the supernatural content of Harry Potter. And I especially love the idea that the surname of a fictional character could be seen as an affront to a metaphor about God. But that's the gloriously demented logic of church billboards. They're so wonderful. But where I really came into all this, and when I started practicing, putting things up on Ship of Fools and making jokes about religion, was when I encountered the talking tombstone. It was all the rage back in the 70s in California, the invention of a standard gravestone with a delightful addition of a built-in speaker. And as visitors approached the grave bearing flowers, a recorded announcement was triggered by laser beam, which produced an eerie metallic voice, which said,
"Hi, I'm the deceased, and my name was Mike Antonio. I died on March 23, 1992, and was laid to rest right here. Thanks for dropping in to see me. I appreciate it. Have a nice day."
And the price for this tasteful granite and bronze memorial, just $5,000, batteries included. But anyway, I'm not really here to talk about graveside furniture, although I've got to say it really fascinates me. But it does reveal the creative friction between the inspiring journey of faith and the very earthbound problems of making sure that journey doesn't end up in a ditch. And that's really what I do want to talk about, this friction between faith and comedy, just for the next few minutes. So, does Jesus get surprised? Do you ever wake up in the night worrying about whether Jesus gets a bit surprised at how the faith he started 2,000 years ago has ended up today? Well, me neither, but it's an interesting question. How did we get from Jesus to where the church is now? Because sometimes the church seems to be quite a lot not like Jesus. There really ought to be an annual competition for church leader least likely to be mistaken for Christ, or denominations least likely to be mistaken for the 12 disciples. I mean, there are those trivial things which sometimes strike you as strange, such as the church's love affair with pointy hats. Take the Pope, especially in the not so distant days when His Holiness really did wear a triple crown. And staying for a second with hats, we mustn't forget the Patriarch of Moscow. Here he is getting into his stretch limousine. Yes, I really, really love that. I mean, I can't play this GIF enough, actually. Just seeing that little cross go down so it doesn't wreck the interior of the car. How did we get from Jesus wearing sandals and a caftan to a patriarch with a collapsible hat, a posse of heavies, and a stretch limo? And then there's the church's love of bling, or those times when a parishioner thinks it's a great idea to turn their bath mat into an altar frontal. And let's not even get into the wilder side of church ceremonial, as shown in this wonderful Easter service in a Catholic church. Yes, it's the resurrection. Wonderful thing about that is the way the congregation clap in a rather perfunctory way, as though they're so used to seeing this every year. Fantastic. I mean, I wish my church was like that. But coming back to our own tradition, there are those wonderful moments in church services when the hymn is announced and you hear a strange choking noise and realize it's the sound of the back pews rocking with laughter. I've got to confess, I've almost laughed myself to death in church And one of the most memorable occasions was when David, a dear friend, who is now in glory, sadly, announced the next hymn at a Baptist evening service. "We stand to sing," he intoned, "break thou the bread of life, dear Lord, to me, as thou didst break the loaves beside the pea." It was such a lovely comedy moment, made all the sweeter because David had let himself down on the very final word of the announcement. But you don't need someone to say "beside the pea" to reduce congregations to pant-wetting laughter, because sometimes reading out the actual lyrics do that on their own. And this normally happens when you're singing from that well-known hymn book, Hymns Ancient and Freudian, with golden oldies such as "Blessed is the man whose bowels move and melt with pity to the poor." It's a wonderful, wonderful sentiment, of course, but maybe it left people, even in the 18th century, thinking about something else. And even the Victorians realized that this line was open to a second meaning, so they edited it to make it a lot better. "Blessed is the man whose breast can move and melt with pity to the poor," and such a huge improvement, obviously. And then there was this wonderful hymn. I've got to say, I would pay good money to announce in church that our next hymn is number 1116, "The Happy Eunuch." And so on. We could keep going, flipping through the hymn book, back to hymn number 215, "What was it made my bosom swell?" And of course, not forgetting hymn number 70, "Blessed Intercourse, when Christians meet and speak of him who died for them." I mean, imagine standing up and announcing that hymn in church, which of course actually happened thousands and thousands of times throughout the 19th century. All of which goes to show that old-fashioned English is the double entendre's friend. I've always found singing in church a joy. I mean, I love singing hymns, I've got to say. But some hymns make you smile for all the wrong reasons. For a start, they use words that lead very different lives in other parts of your brain. Words such as bear, bondage, bosom, bowels, breast, bush, desires, conquest, flesh, gay, kiss, loins, lover, organ, prostrate, queen, rude, seed, submission, succor, tossed, virgin, and womb, and not forgetting good old intercourse. Or as the hymn writer William Bathurst put it, "Let our hearts from sin made free hold sweet intercourse with thee." In fact, I'm sure that my first ever encounter with most words from the lexicon of love happened when I was singing in Sunday school, which must make the hymn book a crash course in sex education. And I remember leaving church one Sunday after we'd sung a hymn. It's a lovely hymn, actually, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." It's one of my favorite hymns, but it's got a really strange line in the middle of it. "Here I raise my Ebenezer." And after the service at the church door, a mischievous friend of mine asked the minister, "How exactly does one raise one's Ebenezer?" And the minister looked at him and just said, "See a doctor." So sadly, a lot of these hymns have now been censored from hymn books, which is a great shame. I mean, they're so wonderful, and there's some kind of lovely innocence about the hymns and about our forebears who sung them. And they have now been airbrushed out of a lot of hymn books. So I'm just going to go back into our presentation here. So those opportunities for laughter, if you like, have gone. But even so, they've been sanitized. There's always some new craziness, popping up in unexpected areas of church life, such as in charismatic banners and murals, which you wouldn't think might offer much opportunity for comedy. But there you go. So here's one. This is fantastic, isn't it? I mean, the concept is great. You know, the word arise with a tree, lovely idea, but the execution has maybe, let it down a bit. Maybe someone should have stood back and said, that tree trunk, maybe that should be in the same red as the letters, would that make it a bit better? And yet no one did, maybe because they were worried that other people would think they were thinking the wrong things. And you'd think churches would learn from this kind of mistake, but happily, they just don't learn from it. It's so wonderful how often this has appeared, in various situations. And even if you go overseas, you can find examples of the same thing. And, continuing with that rather bottom obsessed theme, here's a wonderful service sheet produced by a church for Ash Wednesday last year. Remember that you are but dust, and into dust you shall return. Again, just a little bit of proofreading, just checking there aren't any typos on the service sheet. That's all it requires, just someone to take a second look. Meanwhile, across the pond, things are a little bit different. There are those people who do unexpected things in the name of Christ, or those drivers who want to stick something discreet on the back of their car to identify themselves as a Christian, but it all gets slightly out of hand with the kind of fish sticker. And then there are those believers who get the detail just a little bit wrong, who just don't quite get how modern culture works. And meanwhile, there are those mysteries of the faith, for example, the Holy Trinity, which are, really difficult to penetrate until someone from Lego helpfully comes along to explain Father, Son, and Caspar, the Holy Ghost. And then there are those not so funny things that are done by people who claim the same faith as you, and that is really difficult. Nick Fairbairn, who was once Solicitor General for Scotland, but is now in heaven, in fact, once said this: one of the great difficulties of Christianity is that it keeps falling into the hands of the wrong people. I really love that quote, actually. I think that's great. But Christianity just keeps falling into the hands of the wrong people. And of course, Christianity falls into our hands too, into our wrong hands. And I often wonder if previous generations of Christians are simply shaking their heads and tutting at how we, their children and grandchildren, are doing now that it's fallen to us to run the machinery of the church here on earth. Here's a wonderful poster from the Gospel Centre in Leeds. It doesn't get much better than the church signage gets no better than this. And you get the feeling they know not what they do. They didn't realize that they were making such a brilliant joke, that they were bringing so much happiness to people walking past their church. Church is a serious business, but because it's also a deeply human business, it can't help but go wrong or go right or be hilariously funny for all the wrong reasons or be spine-tinglingly numinous for all the right ones. You're in church on Sunday morning. Outside is a sign which says, "Do not feel a stranger in this church." But you've stopped laughing about that and you're settling into your pew. And in fact, you're feeling a bit down. And then that lovely Graham Kendrick song, bear with me here, that lovely Graham Kendrick song is announced. For this purpose, Christ was revealed to destroy all the works of the evil one. But as you gaze up at the screen and as the hymn surges into life, a wonderful thing happens. Everyone notices at the same moment that in the third line, a critical letter R has been left out. And suddenly, Satan is reduced to running a Chinese takeaway. And that is, I suggest, a wonderful moment for a congregation. They may take a few minutes to recover from it. It may be the thing they remember best about the service afterwards. It may be the only thing they tell their friends about. And that's not a bad thing, because that sort of laughter, and kind of conspiratorial laughter from the back pew, really brings people together, especially because it's naughty laughter, laughter which comes from the back pews rather than from the front. And you know, the same thing can happen for the Lord's Prayer. This is a heartfelt prayer, actually. I pray this prayer pretty much every day. And it can happen, you know, when the service sheet has some hymn heresies in it. It can happen when someone doesn't quite get the spacing between the words right. You know, again, just a little bit of proofreading would make all the difference here. Same problems arise. It can happen in anything the church does where volunteers are trying to do their best, but things don't always look as intended. And the result isn't just funny, but it's really endearing too. It's an expression of genuine human community with all its trials and triumphs. And we know this stuff is deeply human because we see it all around us, not just in church. You know, even when the dilemmas of existentialism are introduced to something as mundane as parking. So this past year, sorry, I'm getting a frog in my throat as I'm talking. Let me have a drink. This past year, it's been a really testing time for churches. And one of the biggest tests has been whether they can go online with any degree of success. It's been a huge adjustment for churches to suddenly get proficient at streaming on YouTube or Facebook, you know, things that you were never taught when you were training to be a minister, or going for Zoom where people can answer back, where they can unmute and say something inappropriate. And it's actually been wonderful to see how willing local churches have been to embrace online church during lockdown. There have been some embarrassing, perilous, and downright hilarious moments, but church leaders have been willing to take risks, make mistakes, and then very sportingly post those mistakes online. I mean, the fools, why did they do that? So I just want to share some golden moments where God really did move in very mysterious ways. I got three or four of these to show you. There's no better place to start than with a Sunday service in the First Church of the Nazarene in Marietta, Georgia, where the whole of creation attempted to join in.
Flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. Your presence in this place, your glory on our face. We're looking to the sky, descending like a cloud. You're standing with us now, Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. So open up the heavens, we want to see you. Open up the floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise. So open up the heavens, we want to see you.
I mean, don't you think that's heroic? I mean, he just kept on going. Fantastic. And meanwhile, in the historic church of St. Mary's, Warwick, someone forgot to turn off the Facebook augmentation filters.
Welcome to St. Mary's for our service of Sunday worship on this third Sunday in Lent, as we continue our journey towards Calvary and Good Friday.
And then delightfully, the Dean of Canterbury Cathedral, no less, the very Reverend Dr. Robert Willis, started doing readings and prayers online, live from his deanery garden, but unexpectedly someone else stole the show.
For Jesus, and finding the people around too many for them to for Jesus, and finding the people around too many for them to.
I do love the kind of sinister way that cat just disappears inside his robes. But then finally, Reverend Stephen Beach of St. Budo, Plymouth, led some online worship experiences which went viral for all the wrong reasons.
Well, welcome back to the last part of our online worship experience from St. Budo Parish Church. The last section we call waiting, and it's a great thing to pause in the presence of God and to ask the question, Lord God, what are you saying to us? And then, of course, to wait for an answer. I've just been pausing between these. Oh dear, I've just caught fire. Oh my word.
And that is the end of that. It's wonderful to actually catch fire during a meditation. What a wonderful thing to happen. He wasn't hurt, obviously, but his jumper was a wreck, I think. So thinking about all those things, I really enjoyed Francis Spufford's book, Unapologetic, which came out a couple of years ago, which has got a subtitle almost 18th century in length, Why, Despite Everything, Christianity Can Still Make Surprisingly Emotional Sense. And Spufford makes his argument for faith not from logical grounds, as apologists often do, proving the existence of God or marshalling the evidence for the resurrection or whatever, but by saying that Christianity is emotionally intelligent and that it connects with our experience of living as fallible and feeling human beings. And I deeply believe in that. You know, the case for faith, if we can call it that, is best made through being human. And that means exploding the kitschy, fake piety of religion. And that's what Ship of Fools is here to do. That's what we intend by everything we do. And I think that's something of what Bonhoeffer meant when he said we should give up the foolish task of trying to be saints and get on with the more important task of trying to be human. That's one of the things that theologically drives the comedy we do on Ship of Fools. And maybe God gets pretty frustrated with us too and wants to give us the finger or even two fingers. And, you know, religion has a very big hold over our lives and imaginations. It influences what we do and how we feel about our lives. When we go into church, we often go there vulnerable. And there are moments in church services which are designed to make us feel vulnerable, when we confess our sins, for example, or when we offer each other the peace. We are offering something of ourselves. And the power that faith holds is something, you know, that has to be respected and used carefully. And yet it is often in the hands of leaders who are abusive or controlling or ambitious or egotistical or very fallen. Sometimes the power of faith has led to wonderful things in the arts, in music, and in painting, in science, healthcare, and social reform, in improving human conditions. But, you know, sometimes it has very weird and crazy consequences too, and people's lives are really marked by it, by people, you know, who exercise power because they love power. And that's why religion needs careful observation, criticism, positive and negative, self-deprecating humor, and satire. One of the positive human responses to faith is laughter and criticism, and it leads to all sorts of interesting questions, such as, where do you draw the line with humor and faith? Can you laugh about God? Can you joke about Jesus? And everyone draws that line in different places, and it can be surprising how personally you feel about it. What we do on Ship of Fools isn't at the sharp end of all that. We're actually not very satirical. There's a lot of playful humor in what we do, as well as some tougher stuff. And that's because I do actually love and believe in my faith. I do actually love church. And so I want to celebrate its eccentricities as well as laugh and question its failings. Because actually, when you go into your local church, you find it's about the little human things, such as jumble sales and tea rotors, or finding a £500 note in the collection plate and then realizing that it's monopoly money that someone's dropped in, or noticing that when the minister concludes the sermon at last and starts praying, she's actually just carrying on preaching, taking the prayer time to get in an extra point or two. And it's those funny things about church life which need to be celebrated and pointed out. You know, this is what church is about. Here's the Church of St. Simon and St. Jude in Castlethorpe, near Milton Keynes, extending a truly warm welcome to church. They really nailed that first impression, haven't they, as you go past in your car. And where they have been, you know, so many other churches have followed, you know, offering that warm, inviting feel that make you want to step inside the church. I sometimes worry that the church might someday stop producing this kind of unintentional comedy gold. But no. Malcolm Muggeridge once said, "Humour is the disparity between human aspiration and human performance." That's why church is often one of the funniest places on earth, because our aspirations are so high, and yet we remain stubbornly, crazily, ridiculously human. Thank you for listening, and if you've been laughing, I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to stop here while I'm still ahead. And there we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was great. That was just what I needed.
Good.
Don't care about anybody else, Simon, man. Just you were talking to me and I was laughing.
Oh, good. Thank you. That's great.